saying that you didn't feel that it was so important that you had worked with spray paint, and that made me feel curious to ask you, what do you feel is important about like this piece and your work?
Well, you know, I think what, in my case, when I discovered self-taught art, folk art, there was a book by Sidney Janis called They Taught Themselves. And when I saw that, I suddenly realized that these people had no training in the use of paints, no training in perspective and anatomy and all those things. And Rousseau especially became such a great artist that even Picasso would buy Rousseau paintings. And they were right up there with the best paintings in the world. And suddenly I realized that being somebody like a photorealist artist, that's just a technique that almost anybody could learn. And so seeing self-taught art was a big change for me in understanding. When I went to art school, I assumed that Norman Rockwell was the best American artist. And when I got to art school, nobody at the art school ever heard of Norman Rockwell.
So that was in like the late 30s?
Well, that was in the 30s. And so it took me a long time to realize that Norman Rockwell, he was a good artist, but there were other artists, all kinds of artists, you know, and especially the self-taught artists. And so that was a big change in my whole attitude about art. I just couldn't understand why people would like.
Well, I mean, I think it is true that a lot of the things that you were experimenting with can now be done on computer. But one of the things that amazes me, you know, through my life of watching you endlessly experiment with visual images, is that everything that you did, along with your interest in the experiment, but they all have your personality, your compositions, your color. The photographs go with the paintings go with the photographs, and it's all like this flowing river of creativity that, and it's different from how things look that are made on computer. It has that personal touch.
Well, I always, one of the things I suppose that influenced the direction of my work was that I didn't make a living with my art.
You had that freedom to do whatever you pleased.
I always had a full-time job, either in advertising or book design. And so, I could do whatever I wanted in my paintings. If it started to go off in one direction, I could either follow or forget it. So that, you know, there wasn't that thing where a gallery would want you to stay in the same mode.
I think that was very important.
And so that had a big effect on the type of work. The other thing was that I always worked fast, and I think that was partly because in advertising and book design and all that, you had to work fast because there was always sort of a deadline. And I never had that urge to make photorealism paintings, where a lot of people did, at least briefly. So, I was. If if my work went in one direction, I could follow it, or I could drop it, and start in a different direction. And so I think that was. Largely because I wasn't with a gallery.
I think so. I think that's really true. But I also saw, though, even with your book design work, which won a lot of prizes, you know, in design, that there too it related. Sometimes the book design inspired things in painting,
Yeah.
and sometimes things in your painting inspired things in your book design, which was
Yeah.
interesting too. But as you say, with the book design, there were a lot of limitations, and with the painting, you were totally free.
That's right.
It was nice.
I actually won more awards in book design than in
Yeah,
painting.
yeah,
And that was partly because my boss, who was the editor of literature, high school literature at Scott Forsman, did not want his books to look like the readers.
yeah,
In the readers, the artwork was incidental and just helpful to the
yeah.
text. He
Descriptive, yeah.
wanted the art that we used to look like art.
Schooled, self-taught artists, and the modern art, and that you never really liked any kind of art that was like pretentious or overworked or frilly. You always were going back to keeping it just very simple.
Yeah, that was still another factor was I was always doubtful about art in school, high school, about why it was art and this painting was art and this painting wasn't art.
Yeah.
Until I came across folk art.
Yeah.
And I think folk art showed me that art didn't have to be, you know, photographic or realistic or this or that. It could be anything. And it was just kind of the impulse that these self-taught painters brought to art, which made me see that art was not a question of good technique or good drawing or anything.
Yeah.
It could be anything that you did.
Yeah.
And so that was a big factor for me.
Yeah, I remember Mom saying to me, because she loved your work so much and always believed in it, and she and I would talk about it. I was always interested in it growing up. And she said she felt that the reason your work was always growing and was always fresh and unique was that you always returned to nature, and that nature is infinite, and was, even though your art might at times be in homage to art, but your colors and your compositions and your inspiration would always come from your love of nature and your returning to nature, which was also something a lot of the self-taught artists had.
Yeah, that was probably another thing when I was quite young. My ambition was to be a trapper.
Yeah.
To go up north, you know, and trap the little beasts.
Yeah.
And then come back for a few months or a year to get the money, and then go back to nature. And that was because I read Hunting and Fishing magazine.
Yes.
And so